So thank you all so much for being here today. Can I just get a show of hands? Who was here yesterday, please? To peer into the audience. That's almost all of you. That's fantastic. So have you been tweeting? Have you been using hashtag IoC Conference 2020? Yes? Good. All right. I would really encourage you to do that today because we want to try to raise the profile of what we're talking about. So this session today is diverse thinking for diverse impact. And I've got the most amazing panel. I feel really honored to be joined today by two of the most incredible global companies and also one of the most impactful companies in the world driving social mobility. So I'd like to hand over to my panelists to introduce themselves, starting first of all with Liza from Google. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Liza, and I lead Google.org's work in economic opportunity and digital skills in Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Thank you. And to Mark.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Wakefield. I lead our corporate social responsibility function for IBM here in the UK.
Thank you. And Helen.
Hi, I'm Helen Milner. I'm the Group Chief Executive for Good Things Foundation. We're a global digital social inclusion charity that is based in Sheffield, and we're now all over the UK, but also all over Australia and working in other countries as well.
Thank you. And I'm the Group Director for Digital Impact at BT, and I run a program called Skills for Tomorrow, which is aiming to help 10 million people develop digital skills over the next 5 years. So I'm going to just start by asking each of the panelists to tell you a little bit more about the work that their organizations are doing to drive diverse impact. This is specifically looking at digital skills and how we address the digital skills gap and looking at the double disadvantage, the people who might not have the best opportunities in life, and what is it we're collectively doing to help a variety of different people from a variety of different backgrounds have the best start in life. And Mark, if I may start with you, please. If you could just introduce, you've got some very, very amazing programs over at IBM, helping a very diverse range of different cohorts. Could you just introduce the room to the types of programs that you're running?
Thank you, Kerensa. And before I talk about the specifics, I'd quite like to open on a more general observation. So this is a personal view, it's not necessarily the corporate view. Maybe I share that with the corporation, I'm not sure, but I have a real sense that the technology industry is at a seriously significant tipping point. I think for the last 30 or 40 years, we've enjoyed the luxury of enthusiasm, acceptance, a welcome for technology. People like the benefits that technology has been bringing them. But like many industries, you get to a point of maturity, people are beginning, I think, to become increasingly questioning of technology and what it's doing to reshape their personal lives, their families' lives, their communities' lives, their working lives. And people are beginning to be a bit more questioning about the impacts of that technology on their lives. I see it could go one or the other way. I think we're at that pretty much critical tipping point at the moment. We have a job of work to do, I think, if we're going to avoid digging ourselves into the weeds, getting stuck and raising antagonisms and antipathy towards technology. And so I think the topic that we're talking about today of inclusion is paramount for us to be addressing, seem to be addressing. So the need to be inclusive is absolutely critical to the future of the tech industry and what we're able to do with the technology in the future. And I think, it's for no accident that our global CEO at the moment, Ginny Rometty, for the last few years, has been very much on a sort of campaign agenda for the need to build trust and for the need for the technology sector to be inclusive, to make sure that we don't leave anybody in this society behind so that everybody is able to benefit from the joys and benefits and other opportunities that technology brings. So that need to be inclusive is a business imperative as well as a moral and social imperative. And I think that, for me, is the context within which we need to be thinking about this discussion. So it's no accident, therefore, that some of our programs are focusing on that. Probably the biggest single one is a program called PTech. We've been developing this program since 2008. Ironically, it started at the height of the financial recession in the US a conversation between then Mayor Bloomberg and our then CEO, Sam Palmisano, where Bloomberg said, there's something seriously wrong in our society. We have record unemployment, and yet we still have, at the peak of unemployment in the US, over 750,000 unfilled vacancies because employers are not able to find people with the right knowledge, the right skill sets, and so on and so forth in order to fill the jobs they've got. So he challenged IBM because he knew that we have a particular interest in education. We believe that education is the key for pretty much everything. It's about our talent, it is about access to society, it is about finding people with the right knowledge and skill sets. It's the bedrock for all progress. He challenged us to say, come up with a different model of schooling, which is what we did. We launched our first school in Brooklyn, in one of the most disadvantaged schools in New York City. In 2011, we've moved from there to a position where we have over 200 schools open and operating in 24 countries, over 200,000 students participating in the program, and the program is growing almost by the day. And fundamentally, it says there is an untapped reservoir of young people who are not getting access to the opportunities that they need in society. In Brooklyn, it's primarily the Black and Hispanic communities. Typically, very few of them graduate from high school, very few of them carry on to college, very few of them get degrees, very few of them enter the professional businesses. So it's all about that. It's all about how do we work with that community, how do we focus on them and their needs, on the challenges that they face in their lives. Some of those may be physical, some of those may be mental, but actually a lot of them are social disadvantages. And how do we work with that group to motivate, inspire them? How do we ensure that they understand what the world of work needs and wants? We as employers are seeking. How do we help them understand what it is that they've got in the way of their talents and opportunities? So it's an amazing program. I was up in Leeds yesterday where we've opened our first PTech program here in the UK. We're in advanced conversations with Scotland about a national scale rollout up there of the program, and we seek to offer this out around the world. So that's PTech, so that's the next generation workforce, and it's a very deliberate inclusion exercise. It's all about social mobility at its heart. But we're also conscious that we, as the purveyors, the creators, the deliverers of some of the emerging technologies, the blockchain, the AI, the quantum, all of these things that you're familiar with, it is our actions which are fundamentally reshaping people's lives, reshaping society. We therefore have that real responsibility to make sure that everybody can benefit from this technology revolution that's going on, and that we carry people with us rather than exclude people or ignore their needs. And so there are substantial sections of the adult working population whom, if we're not careful, will not benefit from these technology revolutions, that who will find that their jobs are disappearing from under their feet in the next few years, and for whom their employers either don't know, don't care, haven't got the resources, whatever the reasons might be, and never get to retrain those people. And there are people out there doing low-paid jobs. If you were listening to Radio 4 this morning, somebody made the point very articulately that there's no such thing as an unskilled job, just a low-paid job. Pretty much every job has a level of skill associated with it. People like veterans, people like migrants and refugees, women returning to work, people with disabilities, people for whom they're unlikely to receive the training that they need through their normal employer. So we've launched a program, it's in its early stages here in the UK at the moment, called Skills Build, which will provide free access to curated learning content, which will enable people to follow pathways into some of the emerging technology disciplines and enable them to acquire the skills they need to get good, well-paid jobs. So there's a couple of the initiatives. There are things that many of you will be already involved in, the Ignite Movement to Work program, things like that. So I'm going to stop there, because there's plenty more I could say. And I think that's enough for the moment.
No, don't you think that's such an inspiring introduction, setting out the context for what we're talking about today, talking about a new model for schooling, and then, you know, having your inaugural school here in Leeds and thinking about branching out into Scotland. A new model of schooling, that's something that is very inspiring, and it's actually, it maps very nicely into what the work of the Institute of Coding is trying to do as well, looking at education in a very different way. And thinking about NGOs, how they could benefit, and different cohorts, like you've got your CBD work as well. I mean, looking at the school children, the future workforces, looking at the NGOs who are helping the capability for social mobility across the world, and looking at CPD as well. So thank you very much. And Liza, I'm going to move on to you. Google is doing some amazing work, but I think similarly it'd be really nice to frame Google's work in the context of the topic and what you care about.
Definitely. So Google.org is Google's philanthropy. We have existed since the beginning of Google, and our mission has been refined over the years of our existence, and currently we phrase it as our mission is to support people who are most marginalized and vulnerable to thrive in digital economy. And we do that in many different ways, and we do three key things. We invest 1% of Google's annual net profit into nonprofits, and that has been something we've been doing throughout the history of Google.org. We also invest Google employee time into nonprofits, and obviously we support the organizations with Google's tech expertise and our products. And specifically looking at economic opportunity, I'm sure the insights that drove us to focus on this specific topic area, we share all of them. We saw that technology was changing the way we think about work and how we learn, and we saw it with our own products. Obviously, we saw that social lift and social mobility was quite broken when it comes to digital skills and access. And also, you mentioned primary education. It was stagnating, and it wasn't relevant to what was the workforce demands were. So these are the key insights that led us to creation of the economic opportunity portfolio, which is now global. And within that portfolio, we have a number of different interventions and programs. We support nonprofits who offer alternative trainings to people who are most in need, and we support Good Things Foundation in the UK for a really long time. We also do a lot of research on the future of work across Europe, Middle East, and Africa as well, looking at what the future of work is going to look like for people who are most in need, what defines good work, etc. And I can give more examples later on in the conversation. We also invest in nonprofits and social enterprises who develop technology that offers alternative solutions to career orientation, job matching, helping young people who are unemployed find jobs, or those who might have barriers accessing public services due to disability or cultural barriers or other. And finally, CS education, computer science education, has been a big pillar of our economic opportunity portfolio and focusing on the early ages. We have a very interesting insight also looking at getting girls into coding, that a lot of problem statements when it comes to coding are not relevant to kind of the ecosystems for girls. So we invest in a lot of nonprofits who adapt the curriculums and training materials to get girls excited as well. So once you have that shift and you position this into the cultural context and what interests them, suddenly it breaks the barrier. And we work with a lot of organizations across the region to help solve this individually and collectively. So these are kind of the broad picture of what we do, but I'm sure we'll have opportunity to speak about the details later on.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would certainly be interested just to understand a little bit more. When you recreate the curriculum materials for girls, do they have different cultural nuances across different territories? How do you do it?
Yes, so we support a number of nonprofits for both girls in school and out of school, and these curriculums are very different between Romania, Nigeria, and the UK, depending on whether it's in the schooling environment or outside the school. We recently gave a grant to a Nigerian organization who's bringing coding classes to girls who are living in really precarious situation with no access to technology. So that was a very interesting challenge. So how do you teach coding to a girl who has never held a smartphone, never seen a computer, and who lives in really, really difficult situation and who hasn't been schooled? So it's a very kind of innovative approach and sort of a mobile academy type approach to also teach kind of the methodologies behind coding, but with creating the aspirations for girls that this is something they could think about for future, that they can have that sort of aspiration for the future in their careers. But the number of interventions and their types and curriculums are very different, and they're all sort of connected to the cultural contexts and ethos of particular region they live in.
Thank you. And I think that concept of making things accessible, making resources relatable is absolutely key. Thinking, you know, we all come in different shapes and sizes. We all think differently. There's a wealth of neurodiversity across the planet, and we've all got different abilities and we've all got different backgrounds. So we really do have to think about how we produce resources that can speak to a variety of different people. And with that in mind, let's move to Good Things Foundation. Helen, why don't you set out the context for the work you're doing and tell us a little bit about how it works in practice?
Yeah, so as a digital social inclusion charity, that very much our work speaks to the double disadvantage. So in the UK, there's almost 12 million people who lack the essential digital skills they need just to really thrive in life and in work. And our vision at Good Things is for a world where everyone can benefit from digital. So this is about recognising the social outcomes that can be gained by actually supporting people to become digitally included and have the basic digital skills that they need. So there's in the UK, there's 90% overlap between digital and social exclusion. So this isn't a niche area we're talking about. So all of the work that we're doing about upskilling those people with the very, very basic digital skills is also talking about improving social outcomes. So be that helping people to get a job, helping people to do the transactional things, to transact with online government services, but then there's also things like saving money. So if you don't have a lot of money, saving money becomes even more important than for people like us. What we do at Good Things Foundation is that we believe that we can have impact at scale through partnership. So in the last 10 years, we've supported 3 million people to cross that digital divide and to have improved social outcomes. And we're going to launch our new strategy this year, and we're going to double that pace. So we're going to be helping 3 million in the next 5 years. That's partly because we're now working outside of the UK, but it's also about the fact that the model of partnership, the model of catalysing a movement for digital social inclusion is so important. I'm going to say how we do it in a moment, but just put a little bit of flavour on this because, you know, I love the big numbers. You know, I'm super proud that we've helped over 3 million people. I think it's now 3.2 million or something like that. Like, I love that number, but I also love meeting the people and listening to the stories. So too, I mean, they're both men, but it's about 50-50 the people that we help gender-wise in the UK. So Roger, we helped him a long time ago. He's like one of the first people in the sort of first 500,000. And he was living on the streets and sofa surfing. He had had a family bereavement, which left him on the streets and a drug user. He was in a homeless shelter that is one of our network partners. And in that shelter, they supported him to learn how to use the internet and to reconnect with family and friends. This was a real epiphany for Roger. He didn't realise that actually technology, these things that he feared and that he thought he couldn't do, was actually his way out. So for Roger, not only did he then start volunteering, then became a paid employee helping others in that shelter to learn how to use the internet. Last time I spoke to Roger, he was actually now employed by a big homeless charity as a supervisor of 5 other people, helping homeless people and other people in recovery to get work. I mean, that is a tremendous journey, and that is just one person from these 3 million. The other person I want to talk about is called Simon, not his real name, but Simon went to his local GP. Simon had just developed type 2 diabetes. And luckily, the local community partner that we work with, we had set up a program for them, and they were in the waiting room at the doctor's surgery. So the doctor, amazing doctor called Dr. Ollie Hart, said to Simon, actually what you really need to do is we need to support you to help you to lose weight and to reduce your type 2 diabetes. But he said, but I can't do that in 7 minutes, but Maxine in the waiting room, she can help you to do that. So then Maxine helped Simon to learn how to use the internet. He then went online, found recipes to help him have a low-carb diet in this example, and go on to groups online on Facebook, etc., where he could then actually get support to lose weight, and he did lose weight, and then he actually removed his risk of type 2 diabetes. So they're two people. And the reason why I wanted to tell those stories is so often when we talk about scaling system solutions, it feels terribly impersonal. But what we're talking about with double disadvantage is incredibly personal. The three things I would say are part of this model. Number one is absolutely a network of community partners. So community partners, hyper-local community partners. And why I use the word hyper-local is quite often when I'm talking to decision makers, they think local means like local authority level. Hyper-local means street level, the people on that street, already in that community, already interacting with the people who have this double disadvantage, who are both digitally and socially excluded. So in the UK, we have 5,000 hyperlocal partners. And the great news is in Australia, in just 2 years, we created a network like this from scratch, and we now have over 3,000 partners in Australia. So the model really works. So that's community centres, they're small local charities, they're public libraries, they're Citizens Advice Bureau, Age UK centres. That we even have a fish and chip shop in Stockport who's amazing, who have a lot of lovely puns. You know, they do fish, peas and family trees, and they're also supporting other local partners in that area doing chips and chats. So, you know, they love their puns with their fish and chip shop. But the point is, it's hyper-local, it's relevant to that local place, that local centre, and it's about, if that's a local job club, they're then putting digital inclusion, digital skills into the support they're helping with people who are already looking for work. So this isn't something bolt-on, this is not a network of high street computer centres, this is communities actually then supporting those people who are local to them. I call this network a big club with a shared vision. We don't give many of them grants, but we do give grants of about £4 million a year. But that's not a lot when you spread it across 5,000 organisations. That's number one. Number two is we have an online learning platform called Learn My Way, which is free. We co-create it with the very users who need it, who have low reading literacy, have English as a second language. So it's very, very simple. And through that co-creation, we can make sure that it's simple and relevant. And then the third thing is partnership. Obviously, the partnership with the hyperlocal centres, but also this national strategic programme, this national and international strategic programme is supported by great partners like Google.org, like BT, like the Department for Education, the NHS, and others. We have around 20, 25 different programmes.
Thank you. And yes, BT are very proud, alongside Google, to be supporting the work of Good Things Foundation. As part of BT Skills for Tomorrow, we've supported 20 already, and this year we're going to be supporting another 70. So that's going to be 90 in place throughout the whole of the UK. And looking at that double disadvantage, thinking about people who are socially excluded, people who are digitally excluded. People don't know what they don't know, and to help people make the most of life, we have to open up those opportunities. I mean, thank God that GP was kind enough to say, actually, you could have your step forward in your health if you get onto the internet, and Maxine was there waiting in the wings, willing to help, willing to give that time. I mean, these are all little little nudges in society, aren't they? The little step changes. It's all to do with the connections that you make and the opportunities that you have. And what I love about the work Good Things Foundation's doing is they've got some amazing resources. We're actually featuring them on BT Skills for Tomorrow in our portal to try to bring them to a wider audience as well. But it helps with assisted learning and it helps with face-to-face. So you actually have somebody working with you to help you get online, access benefits, make the most of life, just kind of have opportunities to access health, education. And back to Mark's point, did anyone else hear the Today programme report? It was incredibly inspiring. Somebody was saying there is no such thing as a no-skilled job. All jobs have skills, and it's our job really now to help people have access to those jobs so they can be economically active and contribute and make the most of life themselves. Now, Helen, did you want to play your film at this point?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that was on the radio and the news today was about the Marmot review. Did anyone listen to that or hear that? So Marmot did a review 10 years ago, and now they've done a Marmot 2020. And it's about health inequalities. So actually what the Marmot review, the 2020 the news today, is actually life expectancy has stalled for the first time in a century. Yeah? And that actually health inequalities has got worse. So in 10 years that we've actually not only stalled and against other countries who haven't stalled, we've also got health inequalities that are worse. That there are 10 communities in the northeast of England where everybody has declining health inequality, and for the poorest 10% of women, they also have declining health inequality. So what this means is that they will die younger, and they will also live longer with health-limiting conditions. So, you know, that's something that's happening for real in our country. And the film I wanted to show was to add a bit more flavour to the work that we do at Good Things Foundation, but we also have worked now for 6 years on and off, and 2 years in a Pathfinder mode with NHS Digital and NHSX. And from that and from the evidence, we've created a model called Digital Health Hubs. So like Simon and the GP, it's about how do we do the bonding and bridging between the amazing work the community sector does around supporting people have improving health outcomes through digital with the formal health network and with health practitioners. And we've got a film to show that.
Thank you.
We're really excited about the Digital Health Hub model. Over the first 2 years of the Widening Digital Participation Programme, we ran a series of Pathfinders. And then we looked at the evidence that we generated and we consolidated to see that if we could invest in places, in communities, and have them, both in a formal and informal way, work with health practitioners around them, then that we would definitely boost people's health outcomes. We're really excited because we think we found a scalable model with scalable lessons for everyone.
We're accessing people here that are coming for a cuppa and coming for their lunch, but having all that enhanced offer as well while they're here, being able to access the NHS services, being able to develop their digital skills, and it's very much about breaking the barriers down. The barriers, they might have the fear factor, the fact that a lot of them haven't been online before.
A digital hub then helps to take each person that comes along the journey from being frightened of digital technology into actually embracing it for the first time. And then if they want to, they can come back, explain the difficulties they're facing, and eventually carry on and take full advantage of it.
And it's very much about how we could support them and really give people the opportunity to gain kind of confidence, skills and independence.
They can investigate and explore digital and the internet, perhaps to find a specific answer to something, or just to find some general information that at whatever time in their life is important.
I think that's what's really important about the Digital Health Hub here is the face-to-face support, that it's not just make the appointment online on your own, you know, from that GP practice and sitting at home and doing it, having that friendly face, that trust, that person that will show them how to do it, their peer as well, that kind of peer support. The digital champion model has really sort of led that kind of confidence building because it's someone they already know. someone they already trust, but it's life-changing, it's saving them so much time, and they're taking control of their own health and well-being as well.
Why don't we have a look at what New Diet can do? There's a great site on NHS, part of NHS UK, that will help you with your type 2 diabetes. There's another great group over here that will help you with your emotional health and well-being.
My story: went off and joined the army, served in the 1st Gulf, left the forces, and then hit a patch in my life where I experienced complex PTSD. And as a gay woman, it's been really hard to access services. I was hopeless with technology, proper technophobe. Didn't even know how to get into emails. I started coming in and having a cup of coffee, and then quickly noticed that you can have a conversation across the room with people. So it's that the community feel, really. So it began quite quickly to feel a comfortable place to be. And I started to use the internet. I wanted to be able to find myself. And the only way that I could do that was to build platforms. By building these platforms, I thought, well, maybe I could help other people that have been so isolated like me. I've got my website up, I've developed my app, I've set up Instagram, I've set up Twitter, and I'm going on today to set up a Google developer.
It's really important because when you sort of hear the stories that it's really impacting on people's lives, so actually being connected to other people that are socially isolated, having the opportunity to FaceTime and Skype their family and friends is life-changing. Actually making a GP appointment online is life-changing.
They not only boost local health and well-being outcomes, but they also provide a very simple solution to empowering the community.
Social prescribing is really important. To use that for digital hubs is a great way to get people into the 21st century. The partnership between the NHS and digital technology is increasing. There is an increasing dependence on the patient base being able to use digital technology to get the best out of the NHS.
If we give them the tools, the knowledge and the skills to keep that going at home, then they can continue that learning journey, that exploration of online health at their own time, in their own pace, in their own place. And that just lets the whole thing seem less daunting, less worrying, more accessible. As we do more of that, people have gone back to the GP and said, do you know what, I did go to destinations, I've learned all this about my new diet and it's marvellous. That allows the GP to think, this works.
Thank you. That's so inspiring. The idea of being able to access the internet enhances your emotional and your physical well-being. It's provable. This is something that we know to be a fact. And with that, I just wanted to sort of share with you, we've been working recently, the Oxford University Internet Institute always runs an internet survey, and we've done some extra work with them to sort of unpack some of their statistics and really try to delve into it. And 49% of those who responded who are retired are not on the internet. 49% of people who responded are not on the internet. Think about the wealth of people out there. And we're an ageing population in the UK. As we grow older, as you were saying, commenting on the report this morning, there'll be more people having disabilities and impairments. More people will have visual impairments, more people will have hearing impairments, more people will have mobility impairments. This is a fact. This is going to happen. It's our job to help people have access to the online world so they can make the most of life. So I want to go back the other end of the spectrum and unpack a little bit more about PTech. It's a remarkable program that IBM are running to give access to school children, a completely new model of schooling. So could we just take a little look at the impacts that you're seeing, and also perhaps some of the research that led you to create this new model? And if you can just paint a picture about how this new model looks.
Sure. So actually, if I'm really honest, when I first came across PTech, as is occasionally the way, I work for a large multinational corporation which is headquartered in the US, and they're great at coming up with great new ideas. And then the challenge for me is that I have to try and apply them within the context of the UK. And over the years, I confess that I've grown somewhat sceptical about the ability to translate those programs. So when I heard about PTech, I was, as expected, pretty sceptical. What changed my perspective on this was meeting some of the graduates from the Brooklyn School for the first time. So these were primarily black young women and men, immensely articulate, confident, vivacious, engaging and aspirational. This is the same group of people whom, had they not had the benefit of the programme, probably would not have completed, for the vast majority of them, they would not have completed their basic high school leavers certificate, let alone go on to get an associate degree from an American university or get a job with IBM. It just wouldn't have happened. And these are young people whom we felt sufficiently confident about to put in front of people like Barack Obama, Angela Merkel, people like that, and have on stage with us in that context and be confident that they were going to be able to articulate the value proposition for PTEC and what they gained from that programme. So meeting those young people in person was a real sort of game changer for me. And essentially what the programme does is say academic skills, basic academic skills, so English and maths, is a prerequisite. There's no getting away from that. You need to get good standards of education in those areas. We want you to aspire towards getting an associate degree. We make that very clear from the get-go in a technical subject, because we're pretty confident that digital skills are going to be the foundation for success, regardless of what area of employment you want to enter into in the future. We want you to develop employability skills. So I have lost count of the many hours, the many times I have sat in meetings with me and my fellow employers. And if you look at the CBI Pearson report each year on skills, you will see that pretty much consistently in this country, you've got a bunch of employers who've been interviewed for the report who are saying pretty much the same thing. Young people don't come out of school with the right knowledge and skills. We can't employ them. We're not getting the right people for the jobs we have available. And I've sat in all sorts of things, sat on panels. We as employers, bluntly, have whinged about the quality of the outputs, if you like, from the school system. But that's all we've done, pretty much, in the main. We haven't done very much to be constructive and to say, what can we do about it to change it? So PTEC is a bit of an answer to that. Eventually, it's we have to help schools change. The system needs to change. Schools are unable to change at the speed of which the employment and labour markets are changing, the speed at which we as employers and our needs are changing. We shouldn't expect them to. They are large institutions funded by governments. Governments have all sorts of measures by which they assess performance. They're not necessarily the measures that we as employers recognise, but we as employers really haven't been very good at articulating what it is that we need instead. So I have to work with schools, I have to work with the teachers, as well as working with the students. And we have to recognise that there are those groups of students out there who need more help. The really bright students will continue to do really well. Perversely, students at the bottom end of the spectrum tend to get more help and support. But there is that very large cohort of students who sit somewhere in the middle, who coast along, don't get enough time and attention, don't get enough support, but who are immensely capable given the opportunity. So every student gets a mentor for the duration of their participation in the PTEC programme, which is somewhere between 4 and 6 years long. They get opportunities to visit workplaces. They get opportunities, if they're successful as they progress through the scheme, to do paid summer internships. So real work, not just a bit of job shadowing here and there. They get set projects, they get guru lectures. There's a whole range of interventions to make their learning journey a real success. And the schools themselves have a real fundamental mantra of sort of not letting those young people fail. They've already been failed in the system, usually quite a lot, by the time they join the PTEC programme. PTEC, when it was first launched, was a bit of a venture into the unknown. For many students who first joined it, it was just, that's the nearest neighbourhood school they go to. PTEC sounds all right. Don't know any better. They joined it, they didn't know. Now PTEC is an aspirational programme for which parents are proactively pushing and encouraging their children to attend because they can see the potential for it. So that combination of employer support, the link with a further education or higher education establishment, so actually you get an integrated learning pathway, because one of the other things we know is that young people go through a series of inflection points. They leave primary school at 11, they may leave secondary school at 16 or 18, they go on to university if they're fortunate enough to do that. Each of those inflection points, you lose lots of people along the way. They fail to make those transitions. So having an integrated pathway where the journey is clear, the end output is clear, what people are learning for, so that sort of notion that people are following a curated pathway towards a potential endpoint job, and they can understand what that job is, they can understand what it might pay them, they know that there will be opportunities out there, proves to be incredibly motivating, inspiring for those young people as well. And the partnership with the FE College or the university, really important. So you begin to build those relationships before young people have finished their school journey. So you don't wait until it finishes and then hope that magically they somehow make that leap from one institution to another. You build that relationship, you get them on the learning pathway, they start learning some of their technical skills early in the process before they finish the school program, and so on and so forth. So you get a fully integrated program. So part of our ambition, because we're not short on ambition with all of these, is actually to drive fundamental change in the school and education system from what it is at the moment, because we don't think ultimately it's going to be fit for purpose as we move forward. Not doing a bad job, don't get me wrong, this is not a criticism, but we need to evolve the system to meet changing needs.
And when you were talking to the graduates, were you able to surface any particular insights from them about what had helped lift their aspirations? Because on those intervention points, they didn't fall off, they carried on and they made it. So were you able to understand what kind of drove them on?
Yeah, so I think, number one, the belief in them as young people and the belief that they could succeed and the belief that if we challenge them, so rather than say, okay, don't worry about it, never mind, you'll never get there, actually saying you can get there, but we will help you. So the support of a mentor, I think, absolutely critical for that group of young people. And then I think, the school system, which, BTEC schools have a policy of trying to make sure that every young person, they don't want young people to fail, they won't let them slip through the system, they will give them every support and encouragement along the way, even if that's pretty challenging to do. They don't lose faith in those young people. And we know that not all young people will achieve the associate degree, and that's not really the point. But they will and can and do achieve quite incredible things, given that support, given that belief, given the opportunity.
Thank you. And moving back to you, Liza, what has Google been doing to think differently and diversely to drive those sorts of different types of diverse impacts?
As an organization, we have a couple of interventions, especially geared at ethnic minorities and girls, which are not related to Google.org as philanthropy. They're run by Google as business, so it's an important precision. And then we have, as Google.org, we invest in a lot of nonprofits, obviously, who, to Helen's point, are super hyper-local, targeted, so and who reach diverse audiences. Internally at Google, we have a Black Googler network, which is known as BGN, who do a lot of work and partner with organizations that work around access to tech for people of color. So, and it's a powerful global network who organize a lot of cultural events. So, and we work with them a lot, especially in the US. Around those type of interventions for ethnic minorities and people of color. In Europe, we also have 2 programs targeted at women, which is called I'm Remarkable, hashtag I'm Remarkable, which was designed actually by a female Googler. Their workshops, it started as a, I believe, internal Google workshop for creating a community of women to empower them on topics of career acceleration, etc., but obviously all focused around tech. And then we took this out of the Google ecosystem into the communities, and they're completely free workshops. And the version of it, online version of it, is called Women Will. Similar kind of trainings available free for everyone around empowering women in tech and career access. On the philanthropic side, our focus is on super local organizations who have targeted interventions. One of my favorite examples is an organization in Belgium called Molenbeek. It's a play on words between a name of the area, Molenbeek, and obviously the geek combined gives Molengeek. Molenbeek, as you might know, was all over the news during the tragic events of the Brussels attacks. And someone who came from that area started a coding academy for kids called Molengeek, specifically for children in those areas. And he was super known in the community, so he could really federate interest. And when he started this, he was basically doing door-to-door, going to families, knocking on people's doors and saying, well, your kid is on the street, saying, mother, why doesn't he spend time in school? We'll teach him coding. And their success rate is incredible now. They have everyone in the Belgian parliament has visited, and they're exploring how they can take their model outside of Belgium through partnerships and make it relevant elsewhere. But what we notice when we look at nonprofits who we support is that often the founders come from the communities, so they know what language to speak, how to address those people, how to motivate them. They design content which speaks to the people and gets them excited so it doesn't feel alien. They also don't patronize the people. So, we often, in the philanthropy space, we love to throw around things of needs or double disadvantage, and it works to create frameworks, in presentations and corporate pitches. But when you go on the streets and you want to speak to people, all these, this works against us, because these are real people with real stories where digital exclusion is connected with a lot of social challenges and barriers, and these people want to find a connection on a human level and don't want to be profiled as an entity that has issues. So it's very important for organizations to have that voice in that sense. With Good Things Foundation, the model where the digital skills training are embedded in hyper-local locations where people are already present. So finding people where they are is super important. A person who is in a difficult situation, actually anyone, if we look at our own lives, will never make that extra click or walk an extra mile to get some knowledge. We have to have it there where we are in our kind of comfort zone. So we find this pattern across the successful projects that we support is that they always find people in the places where they usually go and come to them and say, well, ladies, why don't you take this workshop so you know how to manage your finances better through technology, or how you can get, for example, coding skills so you have a freelance job and gain independence, financial independence. But this, for example, in the context of African countries, for example, markets or hairdressers or other places where you find a lot of women, finding them there and having relevant ambassadors as well, speaking to them who are women who've gone through a similar journey, definitely works. But it's all about the human connection and finding people where they are. and being authentic in the end of the day, which actually, sorry, I'll just add, is very difficult for a corporation, because we live, as I always say, we live in a cloud, and we always have to, go down the stairs to the real world. It's important that we partner with organizations who kind of give us a reality check of what's out there. So our investment and what we do actually has resonance with the people in the communities and with real people, and touches them in a super human, organic way.
Yeah, and you said a number of words there that really resonated with me. The connections point, helping people make connections, a community, which goes back to both of the points that you were making, and this idea of kind of convenience as well. Convenience in the sense that it's available for you, it's where you are, we're coming to you. It's really hard for all of us in all of our lives to, as you say, step that extra mile. And so it's really important that we seek people out where they are. So I think connections, communities, convenience, those are the kind of watchwords that I'm picking up from what you're saying. So thank you very much for that. So moving back to Good Things Foundation, can we think a little bit about kind of what are the main barriers, both in a kind of macro socioeconomic sense, but also the micro? Because I was very struck in your first response, you were talking about the personal, and all of these challenges that people have are actually deeply, deeply personal. And as you said, Liza, it's not about kind of putting people in boxes, it's about thinking of them as human beings and trying to think how you can make the most of life. So would you explain a little bit about the barriers that people face?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say something about the diverse thinking and diverse impact piece first, because hyperlocal, absolutely, non-patronising, absolutely, community connection, absolutely. But there are also techniques that we use to make sure that we fully understand what users need. And so this isn't just about user design or putting the user first or user testing. So things like service design. So I think when we first started doing service design, I'm happy to admit, as the group CEO, I went, yeah, okay, we'll do some of that, not really knowing why it was different to user testing, but actually involving the people, the end users, the frontline staff who often aren't asked to contribute to actually design the solution is so powerful. We did some work in Hastings with another homeless charity, and my service designers actually went out at 5 a.m. in the morning to go and see where the street sleepers were sleeping, so that when they then had the conversation with them, that they then actually understood the context of what they were talking about. And with the Google.org work that we've been doing around Make It Click is work we're doing, we've actually created a peer research group. So we've trained the very people, so in this instance, they're what we call limited users, so they're part of the digitally excluded group, but they do have some internet skills. But we trained a peer research group to actually do the research. So rather than our research team, we trained the very people who understood those local beneficiaries and those local users just that one step clearer. So I think actually thinking about techniques you can use to have that sort of real diverse thinking to get to where the people are, but not just go to where the people are, but actually involve and include the people that we want to really understand so that we create those solutions. So from a macro level, I mean, one of the things that I often talk about is, because I do spend quite a lot of my time trying to persuade people this is an important issue. And that one of the problems I always see that is that a lot of the people who are the decision makers don't know digital and socially excluded people exist, right? Their kids don't go to the same school. They don't live in the same community. They don't, if they do work in their companies, they don't come across them because they're the people who are, on the front desk or serving the meals in the cafe. So actually, their frame of understanding and context isn't there. So what you have to do, and we often take people to visit our local community partners, because actually, however articulate I think I am, or however convincing I am, actually going to talk to someone like Roger or Simon, or talk to the people who are dedicating their lives to supporting them in their community is just so much more powerful. And they will often say that they've never had an experience like it because they've never been to communities like that before, and they've never actually spoken to people who on a day-to-day basis, life is hard, because they lack both those digital and social skills. I think the sort of 4 parameters of barriers at a more macro level are skills, confidence, access, and trust. So trust is now an enormous problem for those 4.1 million people in the UK who have never used the internet. So we've got 60% of people who've never used the internet are worried that if they go online, they will have their identity stolen. Yeah, I think the media has a lot to answer for. But obviously it means that if we're supporting people who are most vulnerable to then learn how to use the internet, then actually the internet isn't a safe place for everybody all of the time. And you need to be able to blend the benefits with actually making sure that people get the skills to keep themselves safe. And then 3 out of 5 people who lack essential digital skills just say, it's not for me. That speaks to your personal point, is that if actually, Simon needed support because he had type 2 diabetes and had worsening health conditions, but Roger needed support because he was isolated and not linked to his community and not linked to friends and family, then actually how do you speak to that? And I'm always thinking about, big scale system change. So how can you speak to a highly personal hook, but also do that at a scaled level? And some of the work we're doing with Google.org with the Make It Click campaign, we're actually doing a campaign. But what's fabulous is we're able to test and iterate it with that peer research group. So that just really, really wonderfully simple things came out. We thought, obviously the design agency thought, oh, this is really cool. We'll just say, why don't you makeitclick.com? And people went, oh, is that a website? We didn't know that was a website. You need to put www on it to tell us it's a website. And actually they wanted specific messages, so help you get a job, help you to stay safe, help you avoid scams, but actually not in such a specific way that it looked like it was just another ad for another a job agency, yeah? So that, but don't be too generic. So we are learning and we're testing and we're iterating, so that's, it's great news, and it's great to have the peer research group actually on the journey with us so that we're keeping it real, that we're talking to the very people who these messages are for, but then they're talking and doing formal research because we've taught them to do it in that way. But it kind of then, so I think we could have a national campaign that could talk in a personal way to the 12 million people we need to get to, obviously some of them some of the time, but then let's not forget the hyper-local as well, because why we've been able to support more than 3 million people already is because those messages are happening in the community where the people are peer-to-peer and can actually have that conversation in a way that is right for that context, but is also being delivered by someone like me. So back to Liza's authenticity point. So I think, I'm always a fan of top-down and bottom-up system change. And I guess we just can't forget the bottom-up. It won't be solved by a big advertising campaign. That actually the bottom-up piece is so essential, and making sure that people who are facing these barriers, who understand these barriers, are part of that solution.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In my experience of running these sorts of projects and programs, it's really important to connect at grassroots and to help the people at grassroots who are helping the people in the communities, as well as try to raise awareness at a more macro level across society. And it's only by bringing the top down and the bottom up together that you can help drive systemic change, which is what we're all doing together, working together for change. So Mark, could you help unpack a little bit about what you feel the barriers are to progress and impact?
So let me start with a little anecdote. This is effectively a story of failure, I think, but illustrates the scale and nature of the challenge. And then some observations about the narrative, because I think the narrative needs to change. So we've run a program as part of the Movement to Work initiative, which is an employer-wide initiative to get young people who are not in education, employment or training to use one of those labels to help them back on to get onto the employment ladder. Been doing that for several years. Particularly successful young people who come through that program, if we think they've got real potential, we may offer them a paid internship for a 6-month period and see how they do, and then they can progress from that. So a couple of years ago, we had a particularly effective, capable young woman, Muslim heritage, East London, didn't know much about technology, didn't know much about IBM or working in a professional services company, etc., etc. Did her 4-week placement with IBM, had a mentor, really shone through that program, and at the end of it, we offered her a 6-month paid assignment with us, so she could continue to grow and develop because we showed real potential. And at the end of that, we thought, great, and we offered her an apprenticeship position within the company, which is a paid permanent role for us. She turned it down, or rather, she didn't turn it down. Her parents turned it down on her behalf and wouldn't let her participate. And we were reminded of this because a couple of weeks ago we held a meeting at one of our neighbouring offices, and lo and behold, here was this young woman in a facilities management role. Going, this is crazy. She's doing a paid full-time job. She could have been in an apprenticeship role with us, and her parents wouldn't allow her to. So from our success, a huge disappointment and a failure that we didn't manage to break through those barriers. So cultural norms and behaviours are one of the challenges we face. So that's something we didn't manage to pull off, which is a real shame for that particular individual. The other thing that I did last year, and I've been trying to do this now and arguing for this for quite a long time, so a lot of our efforts have been focused on STEM education, how do we get more young people studying STEM subjects and going into STEM careers, and particularly how do we get more girls and young women into those roles. Same thing. We were fortunate last year to partner with Disney, who have some similar objectives to us about trying to get more girls and young women into technical and STEM-related careers. And we had quite a long conversation running up to the project. Can we use the power of the Disney brand to change the narrative? Because so far the narrative has been everybody should study STEM, it can lead to great careers, you can earn more money, blah, 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 blah. Quite a male-dominated narrative and focused on the technology itself rather than what you do with the technology. And I've been arguing fairly passionately in a number of places that we need to change the narrative. We need to move the focus away from the technical knowledge and skills. They're not unimportant, but we need to focus the narrative away from that to and what can you do with a technology when you've got that knowledge and skills? How can you use this to make a difference? Because certainly from a gender perspective, the evidence suggests that actually girls and young women are less interested in the technology itself. That's a sort of boys' toys agenda. They're much more interested in, if I've got this knowledge and skills, what can I do with it? So we ran a campaign last year to challenge girls aged 11 to 14 to use their superpower of AI. So we rode on the back of the Captain Marvel film release to challenge girls to use AI to change the world. Phenomenal results. I was a bit hesitant, having designed the program. I'm still hesitant. I wasn't entirely sure that we could explain what AI was to 11-year-old girls, let alone get them to build a working prototype of an idea. So we challenged to come up with an idea. We had more than 200 entries in a period of 3 weeks for that. It was a very constrained timescale from across the country. We selected 10 finalist teams. We teamed them up with a business mentor and a technical mentor, and we challenged them to produce a business plan for their idea and to build a working prototype of their idea using a software platform. And hey, lo and behold, they did. It was fantastic, and we actually had the finals in this very building last July. An amazingly successful campaign. I think Disney and STEM Learning, who we partnered with on this, said it was the most successful STEM education campaign that they had seen in terms of raising awareness, getting engagement, because the narrative had changed. So we were no longer focused on acquisition of the technical knowledge for its own sake, but we were aligning it with, here's what you could do to make a real difference, how you can change the world. So I think we have to really think about that as we move forward. I think that's Helen's point about making things relevant for people.
And can you remember any of the ideas?
Gosh, it's a while ago now. I slept a couple of times. So the winning team wanted to produce a mental health application. So they wanted to produce a mental health app, not in itself a particularly novel idea, but that doesn't really matter. And we've worked with them since to do that. The challenges, of course, are not particularly technical. The challenges are legal and ethical and all of these other things. So actually, for the girls, part of the learning that they got from this was, yes, you can build this stuff, but actually, is it the right thing to do? Will it work in the right way? What are the impacts of this technology on people's lives? What happens if the app gives inappropriate advice? To whom? Do you understand who the users are well enough to know what their real needs might be, etc., etc. So what they thought was a simple coding project, ultimately of applying AI and building a working prototype, they suddenly realized, sort of morphed into this massive piece of work, and they realized that the process of developing a piece of software or developing a solution entailed a whole bunch of sets of knowledge and skills, of which coding was simply one aspect.
And what can IBM and Disney do together to kind of help create a longer tail of that impact? Because I mean, as Bernadette was explaining in the introduction, I'm a storyteller by nature. I really hugely believe in the power of storytelling to forge connections and to make people feel emotionally engaged with something. So what can Disney and IBM now do to help take that further?
So we're thinking about it. We're looking, so this was a pilot project specifically here in the UK. Some of our Canadian colleagues have latched onto the idea. They're exploring whether they can do it. It's not a cheap project, I have to say. The IP issues connected with working with a partner organisation, massive. But I think IBM, the corporation, is certainly looking at this as a model for moving forward and saying, how do we do stuff which demonstrably works and has been led from the field. So at that point about top-down versus bottom-up, this is a bit of a bottom-up initiative from the UK. Hopefully our colleagues at corporate will look at this and go, this does work. We should do this at scale.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing both the success and also the failure. It's really good to hear just the opportunities of what can be done in partnership, and I think that's what we all try to do as companies, but also surfacing. Sometimes we do hit barriers and we can try really, really hard to help, and there are barriers that are kind of beyond our capability of solving. So from a Google perspective, Liza, what do you consider to be the barriers on both a macro and a micro level?
I think we share our vision of barriers similarly to what Mark and Helen were saying, and I just wanted to shift the focus a little bit and look at this kind of introspectively from the systemic barriers and the industry barriers, and we're increasingly looking at the philanthropic space and its challenges, and how we're actually, instead of supporting, we're sort of continuing some of and increasing some of these barriers instead of eliminating them. So there are a couple of kind of 3 or 4 points I wanted to highlight. Firstly, the fragmented investment into the space. So there are a lot of philanthropic organizations who support a lot of different interventions, who have hyper-local relevance, but it's, the scale of these interventions will forever be limited, no matter how great they are, because the fundings will run out. But in the end, what we have, let's say even around Europe, is that number of philanthropic organizations, corporate investment, are supporting very similar projects in very different areas, who eventually, some will continue, some will die down, but there is no collective effort to understand how do we support some of kind of the best projects. And this leads me to the second point, which is data around what works. There is some data and there's some research. There are different organizations, OECD, McKinsey, etc., World Bank. I mean, there are loads of different research around alternative trainings, alternative credentials, motivational barriers. I mean, you can find a ton of research, but there is no single kind of industry accepted piece of work that will say, you know, these are the things that work and these don't, for example, and to have strong proof points around this, which will help the industry to understand where we should double down on and what we should probably, you know, be more cautious around investment. So obviously it's a relatively new space and we need time, but we're, as Google.org, we really want to kind of be at the center of a conversation and bring other philanthropic organizations together for a conversation. Are we doing this right? Are we the reason why these barriers still exist, or are we actually eliminating them? And obviously supporting research and also working with our colleagues across the sector to agree on what research is needed, what's lacking, and how we can use the same proof points to collaborate. And collaboration, I keep talking about this, and especially here, we believe as Google and as Google.org, we cannot do this alone. And that's the hardest bit. We can give 1 million in funding to a nonprofit, but can we partner with XYZ ministry to help scale it? Because we cannot achieve success at scale and eliminate certain barriers if we don't get governments involved, if we don't work across the sector, if we don't collaborate with grassroots organizations, philanthropic organizations, other corporates, etc. Because it's amazing to develop alternative training with easy access jobs, but will that certificate get you a job? Because if corporates don't agree to hire people with alternative credentials, then your whole pipeline breaks there. So it's important to ensure that there is collaboration and cooperation and thought leadership work, which is done across sectors. So, and we understand that nonprofits often, and we see it, and I'm sure from IBM perspective, you see that as well, that organizations, nonprofits compete for funding, and it's understandable. So as philanthropies, we have the mission to kind of find a balance between supporting individual projects, but also giving funding to collaboration. So we both support individual avenues based on data, but when we lift the best and make organizations kind of inside collaboration between the nonprofits and support the partnerships with other sectors. It's very difficult. I struggle with this on a daily basis, and I spend, you know, half of my time is in meetings with government officials, with everyone trying to find connection points, and that dialogue is still very kind of, it's not smooth, so we have a lot of work to do there. And my final point is around cultural relevance of what we do. Tech is, you know, tech today won't be the same tech tomorrow, and even at Google, we feel like, you know, at Google.org, we're kind of far removed from the product development, and sometimes we get these internal emails, oh, you know, this new feature or whatever, and then we can see how fast-paced it is. And for some of the individuals, from Helen's example, this, you know, they're just figured out, you know, that www doesn't always need to be there, but we're already on quantum computing. So how do you, you know, how do we also kind of, how do we make this culturally relevant, the technology with its progress, and ensure that we, people who might feel left behind, they're on this journey, but so the development of tech somehow lives or works hand in hand with also tech education for the right people, and make it relevant for different contexts and potential cultural barriers. The example of the young lady there whose family wasn't quite keen on that. You know, we see that a lot as well. So making sure that tech is accepted. So that's some of the kind of challenges we grapple with, and it's an ongoing battle.
Yeah, and it's interesting you reference back to the responsibility of employers, which is how you started, Mark, thinking about our collective responsibility to rethink what we're hiring and why we're hiring and how we need to enable the talent pipeline to be enriched. So I'm going to come to the audience in a few minutes for some questions or observations or any diverse thinking for diverse impact examples you'd like to share. But Helen, I'd just like to, I noticed you were scribbling away lots of notes there. Was there anything in particular you wanted to say in response to what you were hearing from Mark or from Liza?
Well, you'd be pleased to know I'm scribbling because I'm writing down what they've said so I can go and look it up. I think that the big piece is really how do we collaborate, isn't it? Is that, so, you know, I had no idea that IBM and Disney were doing this stuff. And then, Lisa, you talk about the making coding for girls culturally relevant in Africa, and then obviously we're doing, you know, we're in Sunderland working with peer research groups around how do you make messaging right to make sure that those people who don't have the same opportunities as others, and these things feel very fragmented, don't they? However, what we're doing is we're trying to bring an equality of opportunity to everybody, and that the point you were making, Lisa, about technology actually is the same about society, isn't it? Is that society's moving ahead. All of the people who have the skills, who have the education, who have the opportunities, who live in communities and who are networked with people who will help them and support them and encourage them, are just such a long way away from those other communities, and where however great your school is, you will still end up behind. And so that technology, you know, so I've been working in technology and the internet for over 30 years now, and that, you know, we always thought it was going to be this great leveling up, forgive the phrase, you know, where everyone finally would be able to be equal because it was a world that was out there and on the internet, whereas actually we know it's the world that's right here that's relevant to us and our own personal lives. And so that we won't make the change at the pace that we need to without collaborating, without making sure that we're seeing that those joins. And the big barrier is, you know, how do you have the right ideas and the right ambitions and make sure you're working with the right partners? But then how do you actually make sure that the fundamentals for improving social inclusion in a technology-driven world is prioritized? And I think that at the moment, there's a sense that it's just there and it's in the ether, and therefore it's just going to happen in some kind of osmosis. And I think that's the most frustrating thing, is because it needs real action and real investment. In the UK, one thing, for example, that frustrates me is that the government's going to spend £5 billion on infrastructure so that everyone has access to super fast broadband. But the comparison and the investment in skills is minuscule. In the summer, the UK government, the English government, I believe, is making essential digital skills an entitlement, which means that it's already been legislated that essential digital skills are on the same level as literacy and numeracy for adults, but there's no new money for it. Yeah? So this has to be paid for by the existing adult education budget. So on one hand, yay, for years we've been saying digital skills are an absolutely fundamental skill for everybody, not just children, but all adults in our society. But then on the other hand, there is no new money, and therefore the existing providers who are already receiving adult education budget have to decide what they're not going to teach in a society where we already know from the evidence that actually adult education is declining. So that money is then going to need to be moved from somewhere else to fund essential digital skills. And then over here, infrastructure can be invested in, but over here, skills that give people the real ability to actually use that infrastructure has a tiny, tiny percentage of that investment. I find very, very frustrating, but it's obviously not just the government, is that clearly organisations like the three of you are all funding great initiatives, working with us and with others and collaborating across the sector. And it's only through that collaboration cross-sectory that we're really going to make the impact that we need. But I do think we need to speed up, because otherwise, you know, Marmot's 10 years on around health inequalities. We're just going to be here in 10 years' time talking about the same things, probably slightly different statistics. We would have moved the dial a little bit, but actually without a real fundamental prioritisation of this agenda, then we're not really going to get anything done.
Yeah, that's quite right, and that's one of the reasons why BT is stepping up to help tackle the digital skills gap. And we're aiming to help 10 million people. We've already helped 2 million school children, but we're also working with older, more vulnerable people. We're working with the people who have got that terrible label, not in education, employment or training, and also we're working with small businesses to try to help empower them as well. So I think we've only got a few minutes left. Has anybody got a question they would like to ask?
What I would like to say is I am a recently medically retired head teacher of 27 years. And so one for you, Helen. What is your main age demographic of the 12 million people that you want to support? Because I noticed in the video that was shown, I think 80% of those people were easily 50 and over, and you may or may not be aware of September 19 ONS report on unemployment, that there is the same amount of unemployment in relation to statistics and figures of the over 50s, and that's in line with the under 25s. Yet there is so much investment in our young. Yesterday, when I was here, it was just all talking about the young people. So, Helen, I'm really enlightened that you were talking about it for all and for older people, but I was just curious as to what your main demographic was. And Mark, if you don't mind, I have one for you in relation to, since 2012, IT changed to computing, and it was known as the fourth core subject. So why isn't it made compulsory after Key Stage 3, where every student must have it as an elective like English, maths and science? And the reason being is that governments could come and go every 5 years. They don't want to be associated with the previous government, and they want to say, we've just got the best figures at A-level or at GCSE. And all it is just numbers, and it's not people. And to me, that is just so disheartening. And you massive big companies, like you said, Mark, I feel are really ineffective in governmental change. I'm sorry to say it, and I'd like to know, what is your action, not just talk, because you said the curriculum is not fit for purpose. You're saying businesses are saying the skills are not relevant that the children are coming out with. So how do you impact and affect change in government so that does happen, so our young people have that economic opportunity and viability for the future?
Thank you very much. And so, Helen, just starting with you, would you like to address the point on the demographic,
the demographic, so 11.9 million is adults, and that is 15 plus. So the work that we do is focused on all adults. I think it's important to understand within the 11.9 million, you have people who have never used the internet at all, and you have what we call limited users. So that's either they use it infrequently or they use it to do very little. So that could be a younger person who does have a smartphone but only uses it for social media, for example, and doesn't know how to Google things, doesn't know how to look for work. And we come across quite a lot of them in our work. The demographics, you're right, if you're looking at both the never used and the limited users, it actually starts at 45. And that's quite young when you think that, you know, we're going to have to work to a 70. So it's a big proportion of the working age population. And that I think quite often when people think about people who lack digital skills, they think old people, you know, like people who are out of the workforce, so 65 plus. But there's a very big number between 45 and 65 as well.
Thank you. And to your point as well about education and what big companies trying to do, as you mentioned, Mark, a lot of us are working together for Movement to Work to trying to help address this. And also there's a new coalition that started a couple of months ago called Future.now, which is looking to try to work together and use the power of employers coming together. I don't know, Mark, did you have anything extra that you'd like to add?
Sort of to address those points specifically, I was one of the people who sat on the Royal Society's advisory panel, which led to the introduction of compulsory computing in all key stages for young people. I was ambivalent about whether this was feasible. Yeah.
So how can you say it's compulsory? It's only compulsory up to the end of key stage 3.
Indeed.
Students take their electives. Afterwards, you do not have to take computing as a subject and therefore as a GCSE or as an A-level. So you are
correct
in saying that it's compulsory. It's not.
I misspoke. You're correct. However, the reason it's not compulsory from key stage 4 onwards, it's very simple, and one of the reasons I was ambivalent about whether it should be made compulsory is not the lack of opportunity for young people or the desire of young people to study computer science. We lack a skilled teaching workforce who can deliver this. And so my hesitation is it better to teach something badly for everybody or teach it well for a smaller number of people? So we have been advocating for more resources. That's led to the allocation of £80 million for the National Centre for Computing Education, which we are supporting. So we do have those dialogues with government and other people about all of that, I think.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question? Yes, please, madam.
Firstly, an observation.
Would you like to say your name?
Sorry, my name's Donna Herdsman. So I've just become a school governor, and our biggest debate is how do we attract computer science teachers who want to come and teach computer science? Because one of the reasons I've become a school governor is because the focus of this school is business and technology, which are things that are very dear to my heart, because I think the two go together. So that's just, so I understand there's a challenge, but if you can't get, you know, we could talk about this forever. And I'm part of a European network as well. So, you know, I know we're out of Europe, but we're still part of Europe because we are Europe. You know, the challenge is not just one that's based here. You know, countries across the world are struggling with this very issue. So that's my first observation. Just a thought. So I was quite interested that you used the word cultural barrier several times. And I wonder if it's a need to change the narrative and whether or not we're taking the time to understand what people see as their cultural norms. And the reason I say that is because a couple of years ago I was asked to sit on a panel. It was a financial services organisation. I know this is being filmed and taped, so I'm not going to say which one. And they invited the parents in along with the students predominantly from an ethnic background. And what the parents said afterwards as we mingled with them, that it was the first time, one, they'd seen role models in technology that had been able to share their narrative with both their children and with them. And secondly, they feared and wanted to be able to support their children to go into industries where they felt they had a chance to progress. And they'd never seen senior people that looked like them. And it was the first time they'd seen 4 black people ever in their entire lives in the UK on one panel. So I'm wondering if actually we're missing a step. It all sounds great stuff, but you have to win people's hearts. And I think part of that is letting go of your norm and trying to understand their norm. So I'm wondering, you know, if the panel would like to comment on that particular observation.
Thank you. That's really insightful. Would anyone like to particularly pick up on this point? Rethinking our own way of thinking? Anyone?
I mean, I'd just say yes.
I think we would all agree with you.
I think it's a point really well made, and I think some of the things I was explaining around how we do research differently to make sure we're involving the people from day one that we want to be supporting, I think is part of that, but I 100% support what you're saying.
I think we're all in agreement with you. Thank you. Really appreciate that. I think we've just ever so slightly run over time. There's a burning question at the back. Let's try and squeeze you in. Lady at the back. We're 2 minutes over, so I don't want to keep you from your tea break.
Hi everyone, my name's Kirsty. I run a social enterprise up in Bolton, Greater Manchester. It's it's a social enterprise that only works with people that are unemployed or have experienced financial hardship. And I work with the DWP and the Job Centre to achieve that. It took me 2 years to run a pilot, which we ran last year. Got good results from it. I'm finding it really difficult to secure funding to continue it, even though it's been really impactful. One of our best students was unemployed for a number of months, and within 3 months we upskilled him, and he's now got a job at the Department of Education. He's on quite a good salary as a software engineer. Do you think that for grassroots initiatives it's got worse or more difficult to get funding because so many people are flooding into the market with kind of half-formed ideas, or do you think that it's going to get better as there's more awareness that there's a huge digital skills gap and actually it's getting worse in places like Manchester?
It's a very big question to try to answer in a very short amount of time. Would anybody in particular? Yes,
Yeah,
Liza, please go ahead.
I think there is, you mentioned a word, it's really impactful what you do, and I think we are starting more and more to invest in upskilling of grassroots organizations to run trainings through various partners to help grassroots organizations pitch for money, because there's a mismatch between how the third sector or nonprofit speaks about their impact and what funders expect when, through open calls, etc. So it's also our duty and responsibility to support nonprofits, grassroots nonprofits, with equipping them with formats, tools, knowledge of what are the best ways to talk about the impact, how you measure your data, how you report on that data, and how do you present this data to future funders, to increase the opportunity for the grassroots organization to get funding from people like Google.org and other philanthropies around the world. So it's super important, because this is a very common question that I get. I'm super impactful what my organization does, but I cannot get funding. And then when you break down the impact, what sort of impact it is, do you have the numbers behind it, etc. We realize that there is some work to be done in terms of massaging this and presenting this. So we have a number of organizations who do these trainings, so I'm happy to share this later.
Thank you. So Kirsty, you have a lead, so please follow up afterwards.
Can I just say that we're a social enterprise, a CIC limited by guarantee. I actually think that disadvantages us, and that we should have become a charity, because there's lots of funds like Google.org that we cap. So there's some
we
benefits
support
that we
social
can't.
enterprises.
Do you?
Yeah.
So there's like things that Google would offer, but you have to be a charity in order to access it, and that I think that there's something around the explaining what CICs actually mean at that early stage to founders or social enterprise.
Yeah, just to say, I used to run a KIC as well, a community interest company, and I used to have to go and do fundraising as well. It's really, really difficult, and there are some organisations which will fund specifically charities. There are some that will fund different social enterprises, and it's about trying to navigate that very, very choppy landscape. Helen.
I was just going to say, so Twitter, so I'm at Helen Milner. So if you just contact with me on Twitter, that we can have a chat about the fundraising piece. But the other thing I was going to say is that we did become a charity. So we started as a social enterprise and became a charity, because although funding was available for social enterprises, it was just so much easier to use that, be able to say we're a charity, and everyone kind of go, okay, we get that. And so I do think, but it would depend on how hard that would be and how expensive it would be and all that kind of stuff. So by all means, follow me, and we can help on both those, the fundraising piece, but also the charity kick piece as well.
Now, I've been told I've got to stop. Is that a very hard stop? Can I have one more quick? There's the very patient gentleman here. One
really
quick.
Short. I'll make it the shortest possible version. So I'll just go directly to Mark. Mark, from the PTech route, so this inclusion program that you're running, how many years will I have to wait before I see someone at IBM in a role like yours that's come from that route? So this is about mobility, really.
About 4 years.
4 years. Great. I'll keep.
That was nice and quick, wasn't it? Look, can I just ask you all to sort of say thank you to the panel? We've got Liza, Mark, and Helen. thank you all so much for staying with us and for listening and for your wonderful questions. We've really appreciated your attention and your care feeding back to us today. And I'd like to just say, look, we've got a Google saying, there's a wonderful project, I'm remarkable. We've got an amazing project where people in the Brooklyn projects get to meet Barack Obama and Angela Merkel. And you have people who managed to eradicate the potential of diabetes because of the power of the internet. So I'm really grateful that you're here today, and thank you.